Yesterday's proceedings in the trial for Derek Chauvin saw one of its most high-profile witnesses yet. The Minneapolis police chief took to the witness stand to review his department's use of force and de-escalation policies. He says Floyd's actions went against their principles and values. Jamie Yukas is outside the courthouse with more.
To continue to apply that level of force to a person proned out, handcuffed behind their back, that in no way, shape, or form is anything that is by policy. It is not part of our training, and it is certainly not part of our ethics or our values.
Minneapolis Police Chief Madeira Arredondo told jurors Monday former officer Derek Chauvin did not follow proper policies.
While it is absolutely imperative that our officers go home at the end of their shift, we want to make sure and ensure that our community members go home too. And so sanctity of life is absolutely vital.
The chief told the court Chauvin failed to provide even basic aid to George Floyd.
The defendant violated our policy in terms of rendering aid.
The defense made the point that at the time of Floyd's death, both conscious and unconscious neck restraints were allowed.
Both were permitted under Minneapolis police policy on May 25th of 2020. Agreed?
Yes.
But the chief asked to clarify.
It is contrary to our training to indefinitely place your knee on a prone, handcuffed individual for an indefinite period of time.
Inspector Katie Blackwell oversaw the department's training at the time.
I don't know what kind of improvised position that is. So that's not what we train.
CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman.
Does Derek Chauvin almost have to take the stand to defend himself now?
There are very few cases where I feel that a defendant needs to testify. The only person who can say that he thought that he wasn't causing enough harm for death or serious bodily injury because he had done this maneuver before is Derek Chauvin.
For more insight on this, let's bring in attorney Jesse Weber. He's also a host on the Law and Crime Network. Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. As we heard in Jamie's piece, the chief of the Minneapolis Police Department told prosecutors Chauvin, quote, absolutely violated the department's policies when he knelt on George Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. How significant do you think that testimony was? And also, just how rare is it for a police chief to testify against one of his own officers?
It's extremely rare. You don't usually see this, but then again, you don't usually get a case like this. This was the perfect planning and strategy for the prosecution after a highly emotional first week and powerful first week where we basically saw different angles of the body cam footage. We heard from the bystanders. We heard from commanding officers on the scene. Now we have the highest ranking official in the Minneapolis Police Department saying, what Derek Chauvin did violated our procedures. It violated the ethics we believe in, and there was no justification. So you ask, where could the defense go from there? This is the witness that we were waiting to hear from. And look, we all know that how Chief Arredondo feels about Derek Chauvin and what he did. I mean, it's no secret. But if you didn't know that and you just watched him on the stand, he appeared highly credible and not biased. There were points during his cross-examination with Eric Nelson where he seemed to concede certain points for the defense. And he seemed very truthful and honest about that, which makes him an even stronger witness in the eyes of the jury. I thought he did a fantastic job, and the prosecution had an amazing first day in the second week.
So looking over to the defense then, they pushed back on the police chief's testimony, noting there are several factors to consider applying force to a suspect, including a possible threat from a nearby crowd. This situation was so well documented, so many different videos out there from all different angles. Do you think these factors are enough to sway the jury?
No, I don't. And look, the argument that the crowd was very hostile, when I heard that in the opening statement from Eric Nelson, I was shocked. I don't think that's the best avenue to go for them. But I get what they're saying. You know, look, there's a hostile crowd. And look, Arredondo said that's something you have to take into consideration. You can't just put things in a vacuum and look at a handbook. You have to look at all the surrounding circumstances. But to blame the crowd that they were somehow as a cause or a distracting factor for what happened with Chauvin, again, I don't think that's strong. You know, look, their biggest issue is not the use of restraint. I think that they are going to have an incredibly tough time justifying what Chauvin did. Where they need to gain ground later on is with the cause of death, because everything we've seen is it's very hard to justify what Chauvin did. Now, they might bring in their own experts. They might just seem to suggest that there was more at play here. And again, it's not that Chauvin couldn't use that tactic at first, but to keep the knee on the neck for that period of time is where things took a different turn.
Well, speaking of the cause of death, we also heard testimony from the doctor who provided emergency care to Floyd when he arrived at the hospital. Why is it so critical for jurors to hear this perspective as well?
Okay, so this doctor, highly intelligent, very experienced, and went through the different causes of cardiac arrest. Could it be a heart attack? Could it be poison? Could it be hypothermia? Could it be drugs? And what he said was it was oxygen deprivation. So what could have caused oxygen deprivation? Everybody's thinking that it's because of what the officers did, specifically Chauvin placing his knee on the back of the neck. That is a huge moment for the prosecution to have the ER doctor say that. Now, the defense did have an avenue there. They did have an opening where they said to the doctor, isn't it possible that drugs in the system could have created carbon dioxide and could have led to oxygen deprivation? He said yes. So then they said, well, how come you didn't administer Narcan, an overdose medication? And he said at that point, Floyd had already gone into cardiac arrest. There was no point to apply it. But that's an opening for them that the defense needs to exploit in the coming weeks. The cause of death could be the whole case for them because, again, I don't think they have much more room with the use of restraint. I don't think they can justify it, but they can muddy the waters with the cause of death.
So looking forward to the coming weeks, then, what are some of the biggest obstacles both sides must tackle in this case, looking ahead?
As strong as I think the prosecution's case is, and I think if the jury came back and voted today, they would probably convict him of manslaughter. In order to get the highest charge, second-degree murder, what I believe the prosecution needs to do a little bit more of is trying to show that Derek Chauvin intended to harm, intended to assault George Floyd. That's how you get second-degree murder. We've heard inklings of it. I think they need to tighten that up a little bit more. The defense, obviously, any which way they can try to justify more the use of restraint for Derek Chauvin, that would help them. But where they really need to secure big points is the cause of death. They need to thoroughly cross-examine the medical examiner from Hennepin County, and their own medical experts have to be credible and really have to sell this case. Now, we heard about Derek Chauvin taking the stand. I can go on and on about whether or not that's a good idea or a bad idea. I don't think we're there yet. Cause of death is where the defense needs to go.
Yeah, well, there's so much up in the air. We will all be watching. Jesse Weber, thank you for your insight.
Thank you.
Day 7 of Derek Chauvin's trial is set to get underway in just a few hours. You can stream it live right here on CBSN starting at around 10:30 a.m. Eastern.